As I was researching topics of intersectionality, crossing paths, and what allows society to evolve, I came across one very unique proverb spoken by the esteemed Benjamin Franklin. The heart of a fool is in his mouth, but the mouth of the wise man is in his heart. Now, what this quote is telling us is that the wise man is someone who speaks through his or her actions and attitudes, while the fool is someone who knows of something and says something, but does not mean that something. Now, don't get me wrong, there are a couple things that we might confuse the word fool for, like other words, unsuccessful. But that's absolutely untrue. I'm sure all of us in the audience, and this goes for me too, have made blanket statements before. It's just that to find our purpose, to innovate, to connect, and to create genuine passion, our interests, no matter how all over the place they are what define us. If we take the deliberate step to bring them together, we give ourselves the tools to innovate, the tools to be the wise man. Now, in my life, I found this unlikely intersection between the love I have for my family and the passion I have for public speaking. This intersection and what meaning it gave me defines me today. But for a little bit of background about me first, for around 7 or so years of my life, I was constantly told that I was a distracted yet proud child. I would happily walk into conversation, smile, nod, maybe even wave, and move on to the next best thing I could see, completely forgetting what the other person had told me about. But unfailingly, I would run home to my parents or my friends and make sure to let them know just how much I had learned from that conversation. I needed them to know how smart I was, how good of a listener I was. I craved validation, which in my life became a problem going forward. Now, there have been so many key events in my life that have led up to that intersection I mentioned prior, but I can't talk about all of them. That would take too long. So naturally, I've created a timeline of events that outlines pretty much all of them that really define me. The first of which is a second grade assembly I experienced on special needs. Now, an incredible group of individuals came to my second grade classroom to talk about important things, like autism, how to support someone who has it, and the general need to be respectful and accommodating to all of your peers. It was beautiful. It touched the hearts and minds of so many students. But I'm sure all of you guys can kind of tell where this is going. I was not one of those students. I was the kid sitting in the back of the bleachers, phone under my thigh, playing the coolest game I could find on the App Store. I was whispering to the person next to me about any topic I could think of, except for the one being presented to us. Or I was twiddling my thumbs, out of complete boredom. But again, I ran home to my parents and made sure to let them know just what autism was, how to support anyone who has it. I had no idea what I was talking about, but I made it sound like I did. Again, craving validation. But if I had paid attention, the contents of this presentation, the impact they would have had on my life, is something that's kind of surreal to think about. Now, focusing on the heart of the story, and my personal favorite date is February 20th, 2014, the day my little brother was born. Now, I stayed home that day because I was feeling a little ill, but my dad drove my mom and my brother back from the hospital. And as soon as I saw my mom walk in my mom's arms, I knew he would be incredible. There was genuine joy in our household. Everyone was laughing, everyone had something to say, and I swear to all of you, at 3 days old, it sounded like he did too. It was beautiful and an experience I wouldn't trade for the world. After this point, 4 years passed and I turned 11. I continued to struggle with ideas of boasting my artificial talent or making sure everyone knew what change I could make in the world. But it started to catch up to me. I constantly thought to myself, aside from all the glorification, aside from all the lies I told people, could I really make any difference? Or was I just insignificant? This thought tore at me, and as an 11-year-old entering some of the most important years of his life, it was all the worse. But while I struggled with social complexes, my brother struggled with neurological ones. He had difficulties tying his shoelaces, opening and closing doors, and playing physical games like basketball or football. Not because the physical aspect was difficult, but because he couldn't wrap his head around the rules. Naturally, my parents wanted a formal understanding of what was going on, so they took him to the doctor. And on July 22nd, 2016, they found out that my little brother has autism spectrum disorder. Now, soon after we got the news, there was a clear paradigm shift in my household. Suddenly, we had to be worried about the volume of the TV, the volume of our voices in interactions, and how gentle we were with him. These were things we hadn't thought of before, and never thought we'd end up thinking about. Everyone was on high alert, and quite frankly, were confused. But all I had were questions. I constantly asked myself, all right, I hadn't been able to make change in the world in the past. All I had done was lie. But what change could I make for my brother? What could I do to make his world a better place if I had no tools to make it happen? This was the first inkling of passion I had felt in my life up to that point. But again, I had no tools to make it happen. I had no match to light the candle. Luckily, this entire dilemma was resolved for me as an eager freshman entering high school, and on these very grounds, attending my very first debate club meeting on August 27th, 2021. Now, walking into that room felt kind of magical. Everyone there had something to say about any political topic you could think of, whether it was carbon emissions, high-speed rail trains, or oil in general. It didn't matter what you projected yourself to be outside of debate. All it mattered were your actions and attitudes within the club, thinking back to the wise man we spoke of earlier. Naturally, that spoke to me. It was kind of poetic, so I kept coming. Week after week, meeting after meeting, I made my way to these very grounds to talk about debate. I learned how to put meaning behind each sentence, know each word of what I was saying, and slowly attended my first set of tournaments. The more and more I grew as a speaker, the more and more I learned, the more passionate I was, and finally, the more I was rewarded, winning my first medal in February 21st of 2022, and more to come after that. But again, there was still this void in my heart. My story arc had been resolved. I didn't need validation anymore. I had debate to be my outlet. But what about my brother? How could I make his world a better place? How could I make change if I had no understanding of what to do? I was lost. But one night, sitting in silence, I thought back to that second grade assembly I mentioned at the start of my speech. They had been a group dedicated to speaking to classrooms about such important topics. They touched the hearts and minds of so many, even if I hadn't been one of them. But I thought to myself, if I could speak to just one student in such an important way, that student, the education I provide to them on how to support someone like my brother, that education would become the standard of his future. But how could I make it happen? I knew I had the tools to speak, and I knew I had the framework for what I was going to do. That leads us to the next date on this timeline, July 10th, 2023, the day I co-founded the Lincolnshire Autism Awareness Project. Since then, I've worked with countless people and at countless schools to talk to students about, again, the important topics we mentioned before, related to autism, related to supporting people who have special needs, and generally how important it is to be respectful of all of your peers. For me, it's been an incredible experience engaging my local community in such a way, and really I wouldn't trade it for anything else. Suddenly, this void that had been filled with guilt and the need for validation was replaced with the complete opposite. I knew who I was, I knew who I wanted to be, and I knew that I could make change for my brother in an actual way. This drove me it's been incredible since then, and the passion it's given me, the meaning it's given me is something that defines me at large at this very stage. Now after this, we've reached the very end of the timeline. One thing I'd like to make clear is that the unlikely intersection I've had between my love for my brother and the passion I have for public speaking saved my life in more ways than I could count. Now, to conclude, I want to touch back on that quote I mentioned at the start of the speech. The heart of a fool is in his mouth, but the mouth of the wise man is in his heart.
The wise man is someone who speaks through his or her actions and attitudes, love and care dripping from their words, but that love comes from a place bigger than all of us: passion. Passion is our tool to make ideas life. Passion is our tools to make our names mean something when they are said. But most of all, passion is deliberate. When we choose to bring our interests together and give ourselves meaning beyond what we have right now, we become the wise man I know all of you, anyone can be. The same way it was with my love for my brother, the same way it was for my love for debate. Thank you.